Hey, this is English 201, week 5, part 5. This next section of the story, which is largely on page 10, or no, largely on page 9. I don't think there's anything on, yeah, page 9, is things get more interesting. So let's take a look. Oh, well, first there's another little detail about how his family sort of does not like him. Um, Nobody wanted to be at home by themselves, and it was out of the question to leave the flat entirely empty. So there's three of them, but they don't want there to be zero people because they don't want Gregor the cockroach, running around the whole apartment by himself, because he can't be left alone. Again, this idea like a sick person that can never be left alone, but also that he's some stranger. She entered his room like a sick person or a stranger. That he's a sick person, you can't leave a sick person alone, but you also wouldn't leave a stranger alone in your apartment either. So it fits for both of those metaphors. Um, if Superman is a metaphor for both Christ and immigration, the bug in this story is a metaphor for many different things. It's a lot of things. It's more things than usual. Sometimes things can be a metaphor for one or two or even three things, but this is like a lot of things. Um, they won't. So there's three people in the apartment. They don't want to leave him alone, like a sick person and a stranger. He should not be left in the apartment by himself, because their apartment by himself. But also, um, there can't be one person in the apartment because nobody wants to be alone with him. Again, maybe a sick person, like a stranger, you feel dangerous being left alone in a locked room with a stranger. So again, this is they treat him in multiple ways that suggest these kinds of metaphors that we're kind of working with, and these are the kind of clues that tell you how you should sort of see it. Um, the maid quits. And the maid, she even swore emphatically not to tell anyone the slightest about what had happened, even though no one had asked that of her. This is a detail in the story that I really like, because it suggests the ways in which the family acts like what has happened to Gregor is shameful and should be kept secret. I don't know why. I mean, obviously it's crazy. It's a crazy thing to have happened, but they act like, I don't know how to put it. Well, again, I'm always bouncing around metaphors, right? It's like a family who had a child who was gay or transgender and didn't want to tell all their conservative friends about that. And so the maid, like, it's like the maid says, "Oh, I promise I won't tell anyone." Like, do you see how the maid is reinforcing the idea that there's, like, nobody asked her not to tell anyone, but she's like, "Oh, please, I'm going to leave. I got to quit. I promise I won't tell anyone about your son." Um, so it's the idea that, like, because again, if you had a very conservative family and you were transgender or queer in some way, they might be so ashamed of you that they wouldn't want the neighbors to know. And that's the same thing happening here. Although, what has happened to Gregor that should make them so ashamed? It's not like he's done something. He hasn't hurt anybody. Um, he just, his body changed overnight, and but they treat him like this is something very shameful, very sinful, maybe even, as if their son was a. I mean, there's other ways to do this, but one thing you might, for example, a family might be ashamed to find out that their child was a terrible criminal, was some kind of sex predator or child molestation. They would want to keep it a secret, and they treat Gregor like that. But I'm not sure that fits Gregor. Like, he hasn't done anything wrong, he hasn't hurt anybody, but they act like it's a shameful thing. And the maid, just a random person, goes, "Oh, I promise I won't tell anybody." Like, dude, nobody asked you to keep it a secret, but it lets them know that she feels like this is something that should be kept secret. It's a little like that moment where Billy Bob Thornton says, he throws up after sex with Halle Berry and says, "Don't worry, it's not because you're black," right? It's that same kind of, like, nobody, where did you even get the idea in your head that that was a reasonable way to react? Irony. Okay. Now we get, I think, to one of the most interesting parts of the story. The family's trying to figure out what to do now that Gregor isn't bringing any money home. The father, he has a little cash box, it's like a little safe full of money that he had saved from his business when it had collapsed 5 years earlier. He had thought that nothing at all remained of his father's business. At least, he never told him anything different, and Gregor had never asked about it anyway. The business misfortune had reduced the family to a state of total despair, and Gregor's only concern at that time had been to arrange things so that they could all forget about it as quickly as possible. So then he started working especially hard with a fiery vigor that raised him from junior salesman to traveling representative almost overnight, bringing with it the chance to earn money in quite different ways. Gregor converted his success at work straight into cash he could lay on the table at home for the benefit of his family, astonished and delighted family. They had been good times, and they had never come again, at least not with the same splendor. Even though Gregor had later earned so much, he was in a position to bear the costs of the whole family, and did bear them. They had even got used to it, both Gregor and the family. They took the money with gratitude, and he was glad to provide it, although there was no longer any warm affection given in return. Gregor remained only close to his sister now. Unlike him, she was very fond of music. And a gifted and expressive violinist, his secret plan to send her to the conservatory next year, even though it would cause great expense, that would have to be made up for in some other way. During Gregor's short periods in town, conversation with his sister would often turn to the conservatory, but it was only ever mentioned as a lovely dream that would never be realized. Um, so that's an interesting moment. It's about Gregor being taken for granted. And by the way, if you took 10, hey, you guys all took 101 last semester, which meant you all had to read that essay about happiness. Do you remember the one about the product museum of the failed products? Actually, I don't know why I'm saying this. I bet none of you remember this, but in that essay, there is a phrase. I don't know. Your teacher should have made you look it up and learn it. The phrase is hedonic adaptation. It's not a phrase a lot of people know. It's like a scientific term. But I was really happy that it was in that article because it's a really good point. Hedonic adaptation means that it's when hedonic means related to happiness. Hedonism is living a life of pleasure. Hedonic adaptation is when you get used to happiness. Um, it means that something if something special happens to you and you're not used to it, you're like, wow, this is amazing. But if it happens every week, you stop being excited about it. So, for example, you would be so excited to just be given $5,000, right? Like, here's a briefcase, $5,000 all years. You would be so excited. It would be the most exciting thing that had happened to you ever. Um, but then, if you got a promotion at work and were making $5,000 more a year, after a couple years, you'd get used to that, and you would then be like, after a while, you'd be you. It's not like every year. Let's say you get a $5,000 bonus every year. You'd be excited about it the first year. Oh shit! I didn't even know I was getting a bonus this year. $5,000 at the end of the year for all year. This is great. I didn't no idea I was getting this. But after a while, it would become normal, and you would just expect it every year, right? And you wouldn't be every year. You wouldn't be like, yeah, I got $5,000 because you know you're getting $5,000. You've been getting $5,000 every year for say 5 years. Um, so you become used to it. And in fact, not only would you not be super excited about getting it, if you didn't get it for some reason, you'd lose your mind. You'd be angry at not getting it. That's hedonic adaptation. It's when you get used to something. Gregor provided for his family, and they were at first very happy that he paid for everything. But after a while, they just got used to it. So he used to give them money, and they used to be nice to him. But now they've dropped the being nice to him part. They're not affectionate. They're not warm and friendly. The only person they used to be, oh, we're so you saved our family. You're taking care of us. But then people become used to it, and they start taking you for granted. And that's what Gregor's family has done to him. He's still close with his sister, but you see, he's trying to recapture that feeling. This is fancy summary stuff. But like when he first brought money home to his family, they loved him in return. They were so excited that he was helping out the family and that he'd saved them with his job. But then they got used to it and he doesn't get it anymore. So his new plan is he wants to send his sister to music school because it's going to recreate that feeling of, oh, what a wonderful present. This is amazing. It's something she dreams of, but she's not used to. And so she won't take it for granted. But Gregor's family takes him for granted. Um, that is a pretty normal parent-child relationship, right? Because when you have parents and children often take each other for granted because mom's always there, blah blah blah. You know, this kid's always doing that. You get used to people, and that's what's happened to Gregor's family. They've gotten used to him and they no longer appreciate him. Again, they barely notice him, but now that he's a bug, they fucking notice him. See, that's one of the ironies of the story is that when he was a person helping their family out, he was practically invisible. They didn't give a shit about him. But now that he's turned into a bug, suddenly he's noticeable. They have to pay attention to him, but in a bad way. But it's one of the ironies of the situation that when he was giving his family money every month, they treat him like he was invisible. And now that he's a bug, he's the center of their life, and all they talk about and all they do revolves around him. This is one of the fucked up things about this is that it's put him front and center. Okay, I'll see you in the next video.